and I'm delighted to welcome Carys Esseen, Kalpana, Patel and Robert Hunter from East London Foundation Trust. You're all very welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. I'm really excited to be sharing the stage with Kalpana and Robert today to talk to you about how we are trying to push past some of the challenges that you've heard about today, not by just harnessing evidence-based research, but also by unleashing the power that exists within our communities and our service user populations, and moving beyond just co-production into really lived experience leadership, which we'd like to talk to you about today. Just a bit about where we're coming from. We're coming from North East London. So that map that you just saw with all the red bits, that's where we're from. Our integrated care system is called the North East London Health and Care Partnership. It's a partnership between 7 London boroughs and the City of London Corporation, all the local authorities within that space, all the different health and care agencies across some of the most deprived but also wonderfully culturally rich populations in the UK. One of the ways that integrated care systems are working differently as part of the mandate of being integrated care systems instead of being separate clinical commissioning groups is by asking providers to work together to find those spaces where doing something at scale is going to deliver better outcomes than trying always to do things separately because of the nature of some of the inequalities that our populations face and the common challenges that we face. And so we're here specifically to talk to you about the Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Collaborative in North East London. It's not got a snappy name yet. We're going to be working on that next. Our aim is to work together to improve outcomes, quality, value and equity for people with or at risk of developing a mental health condition, living with a learning disability or autism in North East London. And there are 2 sort of large mental health trusts in the area, East London Mental Health Foundation Trust that I work in, and North East London Foundation Trust. And we're also working very closely with our Integrated Care Board, NHS North East London, to look at how we can fundamentally work differently, commission differently, really respond to those things that Lade was just talking to us about. And in order to do that, we need to work super closely with our communities, with people with lived experience of mental health conditions, learning disabilities and autism, their carers, friends, the people who support them, and crucially all those other agencies, including community organisations, voluntary sector organisations, faith organisations. There are so many in North East London that provide informal but absolutely critical support to communities, as well as primary care and all of the other agencies that exist within our patch. So I'm going to be handing over very shortly, but just to give you a sense of the journey, we have been working together as a system for a long time, but the work we've been doing with our communities up until last year had been a bit more sort of consultative or engaging with our service user populations and our communities, not so much genuinely co-productive, and that with the forthcoming collaborative and the move towards integrated care systems, there was a feeling that we've really got to work very differently, and that's about unleashing the power of lived experience leadership and really distributing power and handing that authority and autonomy back to people with that lived experience to help us make that changes happen. And so a big part of how we're trying to do that through the collaborative was built upon through this summit that we held last September. It was entirely devised and facilitated by people with lived experience. They decided who was invited. They decided who spoke. We had art therapists, unsurprisingly. We had some really wonderful ways into having some really important conversations about mental health, and Robert's going to take you through some of that.
So, yeah, I'm Robert Hunter. I work for ELFT as a peer support lead, or was peer support lead, and also peer participation lead. And I'm also a service user. They're not mutually exclusive. I am both, as are many people who work in healthcare. There's not us or them. It's we all use a service at some point in our lives. And one thing we asked and sort of made sure to ask is what matters to people, what matters. Because, Elft at the front of all their logos and everything else has values. We care, we respect, we trust. Values are important. And I just want to have a moment for all of you, for some people participation, for you all to think about what matters to you with these questions. And then I will read you some of the responses from the word clouds. So just reading out the things we believe in, doing the things we enjoy, understanding ourselves and the things we need, feeling loved, secure, connect to others, caring for and supporting others. So these are the prompts. The things we want to achieve and do, keeping healthy, and the ways we want to be treated and spoken to. Now, a lot of this that I'm about to read out from the word clouds, the bigger words, will come as no surprise to a lot of you, and that's a good thing. It's to make a point of saying that, yeah, it matters to them because it also matters to us. We are all human beings. It's a universally shared experience, a lot of these things that matter to us. And that's because we are as invested in making sure it works as they are. And who better to have a say in the service than those who use it? So, the things we believe in. So, some of the big words were activism, justice, values, equity, beliefs. I'm seeing some of you nod your heads, that's good. Doing the things we enjoy. So, learning, activities, music. Someone put down baking, which was great. Football, writing, walking, concerts. Fresh air. Understanding ourselves and the things we need. The three biggest words on that one was happiness, balance, and purpose. Yeah, exactly. It's common sense, right? But it still needs to be said. Feeling loved, secure, and connected to others. The biggest word there was family. Some of the other ones were connections, friends, home, partner, caring for and supporting others. Carer, children, encourage. One of the biggest words there was peer support, which I'm very, humbled by, that it means that much. The things we want to achieve and do. You had work as the biggest word there, as well as future, working, goals, keeping healthy, exercise, fresh air, healthy eating, physical health, self-care was one of the biggest words. And then the ways we want to be treated. Heard, respect, empathy, kindness, and again, one of the biggest words, if not the biggest word, was human. It matters to people, and I'm so glad I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, and that's because it matters to you too. It's common sense, and as it should be, but it still means it's important to be reminded every now and then of how important they are. Because again, being a healthcare professional and also being a service user are not mutually exclusive. So when I was at the summit, it was a really wonderful experience. And I found a word recently that really rings home just how powerful sort of an experience it was. And it's a bit of a neologism, so it's a bit of a made-up word, but it's sonder. And it's the overwhelming realization that every single person you walk by and you see and your acquaintance with has a life that is as depth and as, emotional and as, fraught with love and anger and pain as yours. Everyone is the protagonist of their own story. And it rang true in that conference that everyone's life was just as full of depth as my own. And when you kind of realize that with culmination of, priorities that were put forward and the word clouds that, again, are commonsensical. It really hammered home just how important all this is in feeling like they have agency and a voice and being heard, and most importantly, being treated as a human being. So, just to go quickly over some of the priorities. Putting what matters to service users and carers front and centre. Enabling and supporting lived experience leadership. Again, going back to that, who better to have a say in the service than those who use it? Embedding and standardising our approach to peer support across North East London. Peer support works. I did it for nearly 2 years. It impacted me just as much as what I was delivering. There is something to be said about the power of a good conversation. Improving cultural awareness and cultural competence. Yeah, it goes without saying, but it needs to be done and needs to be said. Providing more and better support to carers. Improving people's experience of accessing mental health services. That first contact can, make or break their entire route through service. If that first contact is wrong, everything is a step behind. If someone's first experience of using services is, shouting and, taking their agency away and, being thrown into a secure unit, there's a lot of trust that is lost. And lastly, understand and act upon local priorities for mental health. Everyone is different, and that goes to say that every area is different. And in order to make the most change, you have to understand what needs to be changed. And you also understand what work that needs to be done. And every area is different. There is probably a whole thesis that could be written on just how different Newham is to Tower Hamlets. But that's because of how nuanced every area is. Thank you. I'll pass on to Kalpana now to speak more in depth about patient leadership. So thank you very much.
So when we looked at what lived experience patient leadership should look like, a lot of the questions that came up was around the biases, the things that stopped people from getting involved. And this is the matrix that we came up with. The most important thing that I see in that is that it's really about allowing people's greatness to come forward. Practicing that will allow people that are in services, that are carers, that are forgotten about, to learn new skills and actually be part of society and community. So our first one, which is the accessible and the flexible, that's really about creating opportunities where they can get involved within their conditions, within their environment, in terms of what they can handle, what they can't handle. Second part is being non-judgmental, giving people hope and leading by example. It's so often that we do a lot of talking, but we don't walk our talk. And this is really about walking your talk. And if we embed that, not only into the culture that we have in our organisation, but into the culture that we're creating with our lived experience team, I think that will be so powerful in change. The second part, creative and disruptive. Without creative and disruptive ideas, innovations, we don't really change anything. We live in our comfort zone. We're really comfortable there. We're happy with the norm. And going forward, I think everything is changing. And adapting to change, people that have lived experience, people that are carers, they bring so much richness. They bring perspectives that you can't see if you're on the other side. And that's where it really is pioneering. It does change the culture. Curious, promoting and learning. So that's really about being curious, being interested in what the other person is saying and asking the questions to understand why. And that works on both sides. And that grows the relationship. It grows, whatever the purpose, whatever the project you're working on, it grows that into becoming something much more meaningful, much more useful in what it was intended to be. Fully resourced. Now that's about fair pay, fair right to skills, learning, training. And if you think about it, everybody gets paid. But as a somebody that is a peer support, not peer support worker, a patient involvement rep or a volunteer, you give those skills for free, but you don't really get anything back. And it kind of helps with building confidence. Because where you are, you do have a low self-esteem, you do have a low self-worth. And just to be able to earn something does give you a lot of pride. And then supportive and empowering, and that's really about empowering people to become leaders. There is no reason why people with lived experience cannot be leading. And with their leadership, I think things can change. It creates a completely different dynamic. And finally, the flat hierarchy. So this is really representative and equal. This is really about having a balance that everybody that's in this team is equal. It's not about how much knowledge you have. It's not about how much experience you have. It's really about understandable language. It's about being able to communicate to each other, making it sort of accessible, making leadership be easy, giving confidence to other people. And that for me is a sign of a good leader. They're able to give away their confidence rather than keep it. And I think we've covered all of, and it's genuinely inclusive as well. So how do we achieve this? Well, I think when we achieve this, what we do get is a rebalance of power. So service users, carers, families, they get a say in the service. If they get a say in the service, we're providing a service that's really catered and to their needs. Support people's personal development. Well, yes, because then we're creating communities. We're helping people get skills. We are learning ourselves. The organisation is growing. Everything is working. It's more community. And we have shifted away from that. If you look at the culture now, the community part of our lives is really not as existent as it was before. And finally, it's about holding the system to account. So when things don't work, it's not about hiding it in the corner. It's about bringing a light to it and saying, hey, it didn't work. What didn't work? What can we learn? And then being able to hold people to account. It's much better to be transparent, see what's wrong, and improve than to be scared of that little box in the corner. So that's patient leadership, lived experience leadership. I'm going to pass it over to Carys.
Thanks both. So just to take us home and to think about how we're actually trying to, as you say, walk the talk. What's really important is that those priorities, those 7 priorities that Rob set out that were developed as a result of that co-production with our resident population, they now represent the ICS strategy for mental health. So what started with that question, what matters to you, is now forming the basis of the 10-year mental health strategy for our North East London integrated care system. We've now got paid lived experience leadership roles for our collaborative. So really, again, honouring that principle about resourcing and not asking people just to do things for free, recognising it as a work, as a profession in its own right. And something that I'm really very excited about is that our Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Collaborative makes really big, important decisions in our integrated care system about hundreds of millions of pounds. The way that collaborative is governed is that there is a committee which has representatives from the 2 big trusts, from the ICB, from local authority, voluntary sector, primary care. But the biggest contingent of voting members on that committee are 4 seats for people with lived experience. They represent a spread of people across the 7 boroughs in our system. They represent a spread of experience across mental health, learning disabilities and autism, across carers, across people who view services, are using services. And that representation, that involvement in that committee is changing the way that we do business. It's changing the conversation. It's really meaningful. It's not tokenistic. That doesn't mean to say that it's job done. We've got so much more to do. We're challenging ourselves always to ask, what if? Really living that thing about innovation and imagination, and also about what next. I could also wax lyrical about all the work we're doing with children and young people, and the work we're planning to do with our populations with learning disabilities and autism. But we don't have a perfect system yet. No one ever does. I think our principles are right. They're co-produced values that we're trying to live and demonstrate. And watch this space. Thank you so much.